a very warm welcome to you. Thanks very much for joining this webinar. One in a number of webinars we're running over the course of this year and next year as part of our series of events for the Energy, Environment, Climate Action Division of Engineers Ireland. So Dave Lenihan is my name. I chair the division at the minute, and along with my colleagues, we've put forward this exciting session for the next hour to focus on something I think we're going to start hearing a lot more about over the coming months and years, and that's long duration energy storage, or LDES. So I've got two great speakers lined up to join me shortly to talk about this topic. For anyone, I guess, not familiar, as we are all aware, there are some ambitious targets for 2030 now in the form of an 80% RESE target. But I guess we want to talk a little bit longer term today, and we want to talk about the fully decarbonised power system and what will that require for periods when the wind doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine, for example. So one of those potential technologies that can offer solutions is LDES. And over the course of the next hour, we're going to hear from Peter Harte, the CEO of NetZero Energy, and also from Bryan Murray, who's the manager of the LDES project at EirGrid. Now, I would encourage everyone to participate as well. We've got a Q&A box down the bottom of your screen, so you can ask your questions there. We will be dedicating at least 20 minutes in the second half of the session to take those questions, to have a discussion with Peter and with Bryan, so please do get involved. Just to add as well, this is our last event before Christmas, but we will be back in February. For anyone interested in district heating, we'll be running a full session with SCAI and DEC on that topic in the new year. So please do check that out. It's open for registrations now, actually, on the website. But for now, look, I'm going to introduce our first speaker. So that's Bryan Murray. As I mentioned, Bryan is the manager of the long duration energy storage project at EirGrid, bringing over 13 years of experience across the energy sector with roles in regulatory bodies, academia, energy trading, and most recently working with the TSO EirGrid. So Bryan, I might hand the floor to you, and looking forward to the presentation.
Folks, my name is Bryan Murray. I manage the long duration energy storage project with EirGrid, and I also manage the scheduling dispatch project. One of the key initiatives of the scheduling dispatch project actually interacts with storage assets. So we have the SPS modification and the SPS initiative, which is initiative 3 in scheduling dispatch, will allow storage assets to operate more efficiently in the markets. So there is a bit of crossover there in the work that I'm doing. So, like, why do we need LDES? Look, as Dave has alluded to there, there's a number of different overlapping targets coming down the stream for us, be it the climate action plans in the south or the Climate Change Act in the north of Ireland, allied to the carbon budgets. There's kind of a number of different kind of overlapping factors there that are driving us to reduce our carbon consumption, also to look to reduce stuff like dispatch down, and to do so, by 2030 is an initial target, and then we hopefully are kind of moving towards net zero as we move kind of further out the curve. So as we're seeing there, just from some of the graphs, I know this page is a bit busy, but we're kind of forecasting substantial electricity demand growth, kind of over the next decade. Also, a substantial amount of additional renewables are being called for as part of the climate action plans. And then, what we're seeing kind of coming hand in hand with that really is an increase in dispatch down. So dispatch down essentially is when there's a amount of renewables on the system that the system can handle at the time. So, one of the key ways of helping to kind of manage that and kind of flatten out the supply of renewables is through the connection of long duration energy storage, which can consume at times of an abundance of renewables, and then can start to dispatch that volume back into the market or back onto the system at a time when renewables start to fall off. So look, what we've done is, we've done some modeling on this. So the Shaping Our Electricity Future, which is a document published by EirGrid last summer, in the summer of 2023, it outlined EirGrid's roadmap towards 2030, taking into account, as I said, all the additional renewables that are being put in place, and then imposing those targets. So, like, how would we go about reaching those targets, such as the keeping our carbon consumption below 3 megatons, the 80% renewables on the system, etc. So, kind of what shaping kind of suggested really was three solutions for us. It was increased interconnection, it was increased demand side management, and then increased storage. So that's kind of where the storage project within EirGrid kind of spun out from. So what we would have carried out then initially was just some model runs kind of based on the shaping model, just to kind of highlight the benefits that storage can give. So these are initial figures based off of durations and volumes, as you can see on the right hand side. So these are incremental volumes of storage. Now the reason why we've kept it to the single digit figures is because we're very much looking at 2030 as being the end point for the shaping piece of work. Now that's not to say that we're constraining ourselves to look beyond 2030, because we are carrying out additional pieces of work such as tomorrow's energy scenarios. We also have a NetZero project as well that looks up to 2050, where we're modeling longer duration volumes. But this is just kind of indicative figures here, working off those shaping volumes. So look, as you can see, kind of everything is trending in the direction that we would be hoping for. Reduction in carbon consumption, increased res penetration, a reduction in dispatch down, and then an overall production cost saving as well. So, those are four fairly positive things from the perspective of the TSO. If you can reduce carbon, increase renewables on the system, reduce dispatch down, which is essentially the wastage of renewables, and do that all while saving money, that kind of shows that storage is very much ticking all the boxes for us. As I said, look, we are looking at additional modeling projects, and look, we are looking at longer duration assets as well. So kind of what we've done really is we've gone and looked at what technology is out there, and we've taken a dual approach to this. Very much kind of looking at what we can connect in the short term, and then as well what kind of novel technologies or what innovative technologies are out there, and that we can look to incentivize as well. So, for the short term, kind of pre-2030, we've very much been focusing on modeling and looking to kind of incentivize the technology that's there at the moment, and that's readily available, because like for us, a big part of our procurement will also be deliverability. So, but we don't want to hamstring kind of novel technologies or innovative technologies from coming into Ireland as well. So we've looked at a technology readiness level assessment as one of our qualification criteria for a potential procurement mechanism. And what that would essentially do is, you see your technology readiness level, it runs from 1 to 9. Still haven't quite figured out why they haven't run it from 1 to 10, but it runs from 1 to 9 for some reason. And we're looking to procure assets that are 7 or above on the technology readiness level, which essentially means that they're available. They've been used on a system, and they're scalable. So hand in hand with that, then as well, we've pushed and we've kind of influenced DEC in terms of their storage framework policy, where we've got them to put in place an innovation sandbox, which would give both the TSO and the DSO essentially a pot of money to look to bring on technologies that have a score below 7 on the TRL, so kind of newer, more innovative technologies, and kind of allow us to see what learnings we can get from those guys. So essentially just kind of running live trials, essentially. But just showing as well that Ireland is a place where you can come and innovate in this space. So look, here's an overview of technology readiness level. As I said, we're kind of focusing on 7 or above. So, essentially units that are available to us. Everything below that is more in the either concept or in the kind of pilot scale. So we're looking to kind of push that down a separate work stream. So what are the barriers to entry? So kind of what we've seen really is, we've seen a lot of 2 hours and less storage assets come through. and most of those assets have been procured under what were kind of volume cap contracts, which were essentially where we procured storage to provide system services. But we've seen storage assets struggle to make a business case based on kind of market access, kind of standalone market access, where you come in through the capacity remuneration mechanism and you look to revenue stack, or you look to kind of build a business case off of providing megawatts to the system. As part of that, we carried out a missing money analysis last year, which highlighted that there was a shortfall in potential revenue here, and that was creating a barrier to entry. So specifically what I'm working on is the creation of a route to market, so a procurement mechanism whereby we will look to put in place some kind of an incentivization scheme for storage assets to come in to the Irish market. Like storage as well it kind of has a different costs structure as well to the majority of assets that you'd see in an energy system, whereby the likes of a combined cycle gas turbine or an OCGT or even a coal station, their cost structure is completely different to what a storage asset is. So a storage asset is fairly capital intensive, fairly upfront, but then its variable cost is usually quite low. So most of its costs are kind of front loaded, and it's also because it's a new technology, we're seeing it struggle to be incentivized by the capacity remuneration mechanism, because the methodology for the CRM it requires 5 years of data points to give if you don't have 5 years of data points, essentially what you end up with is a system-wide derating factor, which is currently undervaluing storage. So that's something that we're looking at as well. But look, we are identifying that there is a need for a specific route to market to be created here. So we've been looking at that over the last 2 years, and I've been working with the likes of Peter on different aspects of that and kind of getting feedback from industry. So look, what we've done, we've carried out a number of workshops across EirGrid and Sony to kind of look at different market options, and a lot of the post-procurement issues as well. So there's a number of kind of post-procurement issues or post-procurement elements that we'll need to cover off, such as whether the assets will be firm, what kind of MIC that they'll have. So MIC essentially is their ability to charge, so it's their import capacity. We've also been working on some papers that are sitting with the RAs at the moment on putting in place hybrid connections, and we've just been kind of doing essentially a number of internal workshops where we discuss this. We kind of look to see what overlaps there will be with other pieces of work, because there's always concurrent projects going on across EirGrid as well, whether it's the future arrangements for system services, or whether it's the connection or reintegration into the European market that will follow the go live of the Celtic interconnector. So there's always a overlap there with other pieces of work, and there can be externalities as well that will impact on other people's work. So it's important to kind of do an internal assessment as well. We've engaged fairly extensively with our main stakeholders, so we would meet with industry quite regularly. We have we're on a working group with DEC, so with DEC, and we're on a working group with Crew in the south. We also have a working group then with both RAs, so Crew in the south and UR in the north, and we're on another working group on top of that. Sounds like all I do is go to working groups by the sounds of things, but we're on another working group with the DSO in the south, so with ESB networks, just because they're also running a storage procurement for the distribution network. Allied to that, then we have liaised with other TSOs around the world to see kind of what they're working on. So we have had sessions with National Grid or NESO in the UK. We've also met with the AIM in Australia, and then via the NSOE arrangements, we've been involved in the NSOE's paper on this, and we've had separate conversations then, not just at a group level, but with individual TSOs across Europe. So we've met with the Greek TSO, we've met with the Italian TSO. So we're trying to see and establish kind of best practice here, see what other people have done, see what kind of people's other TSOs thinking on this and see is there any kind of lessons learned that we can get, and even just having other people to bounce ideas off of as well is very important. So we published a call for evidence in October 2023, which would have been just us going out the industry and saying, and kind of floating a couple of ideas, kind of saying, this is our view on storage, asking a lot of questions. I think we asked 31 or 30 plus questions of industry just to kind of garner their feedback on things. Then, yeah, look, I've kind of touched on the modeling previously. So look, we're working through kind of a phase 2 of modeling at the moment, where we are looking to model some longer duration assets as well. So the initial modeling we carried out was from the Shaping Our Electricity Future model, and we're now carrying out some a more extensive modeling project. Then, as I said, look, our numerous working groups that I touched on previously, but look, we're looking to align kind of plans and expectations there, because there's kind of a number of different parties here. So the way it kind of works is the policy kind of comes from DEC, and then we take crew take their instruction from them, and then we kind of take the instruction from crew, whereby we kind of stand with crew and we look to establish a timeline for the delivery of, firstly, consultations, and then for delivery of a procurement mechanism. And then there's the ancillary things in that we covered off, such as kind of funding and work plans and review plans and stakeholder engagement. So we have to agree all that with DEC and crew. So we're just kind of working through that at the moment. So how can we go get some storage? So we've kind of landed on 3 main options. So the CRM essentially is CRM route. I've kind of diminutivized it down into just calling it CRM, but essentially it's current market arrangements. And what that is or why we've kind of brought that up here is because what we're seeing at the moment is we did see for a number of years, or we did see for a period of time, that CRM was struggling to incentivize storage kind of beyond 2 hours. We are seeing some kind of 4, 6, 8 hours assets coming through the CRM at the moment. So I think we have in excess of 400 megawatts coming through the ECP process at the moment. Now, it's still not enough to help us, reach our 2030 targets and go beyond that. So we still do feel that there is a need for additional incentive. But look, we have looked at that as that essentially is going to do nothing approach, or the very small tweaks approach. We've also looked at the cap and floor mechanism, which would be akin to what's happening in GB. So that would be giving assets full market access, putting in place kind of a minimum floor revenue for them, which gives them an amount of certainty that they could then go and look to finance their project off of. And then you would put in place a cap. So there's different ways of doing cap and floor mechanism. You can have a shared upside up to a cap, or you can have, and then you can just cap the revenue. And everything in excess of that would go back to the PSO levy, or you could have no share until the cap, and then you just have a share beyond the cap. So there are a number of different kind of tweaks you can make to a cap and floor as well. And then the third option we've looked at is a system services contract. So we have seen one of our counterparts in Germany, look to do something similar, whereby essentially they've procured some storage assets, and they call them, I think in Germany they actually termed them grid airbags, which essentially was, they were going to provide system services, kind of almost kind of a safety net for the system in terms of, if they had issues on the grid at the time. So we have looked at that as well, and we will be including these options in our consultation paper. So what participants what kind of different technologies have we spoken to? So we've spoken to Form Energy, are one party who have a high enough profile across the industry. So they have a 100-hour battery technology that they're have trialed in a number of occasions in the US, and they have one unit, one trial, or one project in planning here, I think, at the moment. So that'll be the first outside of the US. We've spoken to Silver Mines Pumped Hydro. So this is just kind of giving you an idea of the different types of technology coming down the line. So it's not all just battery assets. We've a pumped hydro guys we're talking to thermal heat storage units. We're talking to people about hydrogen storage. and we're talking to multiple lithium-ion interests as well. So I'm not sure if you all have read DEC's storage policy framework, but that was published in July of this year, and it put a couple of asks on both Crew and the TSO. One was, well, the main ones for us really were the deployment of an additional 500 megawatts of storage immediately, that storage is in excess of 4 hours. So look, we feel that that's starting to happen anyway via the current market mechanisms. And then the second one was then for us to have an enduring route to market in place by the end of 2028. So the next steps for us, we're currently working on agreeing a consultation timeline with the RAs, and the intention is to publish this prior to Christmas time. So there is a future power markets industry workshop next Wednesday. I think it's either Wednesday or Thursday next week. I'll have to have a look again, but we intend on publishing a consultation timeline there. We've had kind of extensive discussions with both the RAs and DEC on this. So we've had to get agreement from the two of them. So we finally kind of got agreement last Friday. So the intention is to publish that next week. As part of that, we're looking to organize a stakeholder workshop in Q1 of next year. So we, as part of the call for evidence, we had kind of a one-day workshop, a one-day offsite where we had, all the main stakeholders attend, and we intend to kind of replicate that in Q1 of next year. There is potential for more if there's interest. And then, look, we're also looking to expand the storage team and engage external partners. So, look, we are engaging external legal partners, and we are engaging some external modelling partners as well, just to give us some additional support. And then we are working with DEC and the RAs to decide on a budget for procurement. So that is everything from me. If there are any questions, just let me know.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks a million. All really interesting stuff. And look, if people have questions, and I can see there are some questions coming in, please do pop them into the Q&A box at the bottom, and we will come to them together at the end of Peter's presentation. But for now, look, we might move on to Peter Harte, CEO of NetZero Energy. Peter has a long track record in the industry, dating back to SWS Energy in 2003, as a co-founder of Element Power, conceiving the Green Link Interconnector project, which is going to come online very soon, and then moving on to Statkraft. He now heads up NetZero Energy. He's also a member of the EirGrid DS3 Advisory Committee and a former chair of the Irish Wind Energy Association. So over to you, Peter.
Very good. Thanks, Dave. I've got 10 slides, 5 points. I'll get through it nice and quickly and see if we can get some good quality Q&A on going as well. I suppose, look, Bryan has set out the policy and market background, so I'm going to look more at sort of system and technology and how we get there. And I suppose the kind of the challenges that we have at the moment are set out here. And I deliberately use the word energy system as opposed to electricity system, because I think the consensus is now pretty much settled that we're going to electrify everything. Certainly all transport, heat, industry, that all have very, very clear routes to electrification. So we're really talking about the entire Irish energy system. But look, first things first is the electricity system, and as Bryan mentioned, it's 80% now, but that's a couple of years later, it's 100%. So let's make sure that whatever we do for 80% isn't backtracking then when we need to go to 100%. Second point is security of supply. Look, it hardly needs to be said at this stage. We've just had a gas price crisis. It didn't, you don't need the lights to go out for it to be a security supply issue. Importing a price crisis is just as bad. Data centers, I'll be blunt. There's a lot of noise and a lot of hot air around at the moment, but they don't appear to have a solid energy strategy, and we don't. And Ireland, to its, I suppose, embarrassment, doesn't seem to have a clear message for people who wish to build data centers in Ireland. So we think that should be fixed. Grid is a bottleneck. I mean, EirGrid and Bryan and his colleagues have got much better at building grid, but I still think people need to be very cautious about assuming that it's even possible to build a new 220 kV circuit. And if you can't do that, you're very constrained in what you can do. And I think we always need to keep an eye on, in the energy system, keep an eye on just what is the cost to the BSO customer of dispatching down a lot of wind, given that we have now, I suppose, decided to move that cost off of the responsibility of the generator. It's now pooled centrally. That's a good move. But now that you have pooled it, you do have to deal with it. So straight in, let's look at what we think works. The topic is LDES. if you start off with a system, what's a given? We're going to build the renewables anyway. So there's the renewable targets, 5 + 2 + 8 + 9. That's a total of about 22 gigawatts of renewables on a system with a peak demand of about 7 gigawatts. So if you have nothing else, take off everything else, take off the, turn off the interconnectors, hold those for the moment, take off the fossil fuel, and just run that system. That gives you your 80% target, and that's why that volume was chosen. But it also gives you a very large surplus of about 45%. So we call this what's left over. Obviously, the lights will go out in that sort of a world because you haven't got enough power for the last 20%, and I call that residual demand. Okay, it's what the wind can never reach, almost no matter how much you build of it, really. And I mean wind and solar, of course. So the question is, how can you fix that? You can of course build some sort of traditional power station baseload type plant to deal with that, but we think that's a bad idea. We think you should use LDES, and I'll come back to why for a moment. So the question then is, you can start throwing storage at this problem, and the more storage, if you look at the graph on the right, the more storage hours that you throw at this deficit, the more you can reduce the deficit. So you're starting at the left with a 20% deficit, and the more you throw duration at it, the more you can eliminate that deficit. And I suppose what's important to see here is that the first few hours get you a great bang for your buck. You can get a lot of energy. So if you put on something like a 4-hour lithium-ion battery, which is very popular at the moment, you can make real inroads on reducing that deficit. But you start running out very quickly. You can get it down to like 8-10%, but then what do you do then? Now you need to start building something on 40 or 50 hours. And I suppose that over at the other extreme right of the chart is interesting as well. So what we did is we've run a 40-year annual hourly model of renewables and demand, and essentially just trial and error looked at, well, how big a store would you need at the start of that 40-year, 4-decade period if you're topping it up only from wind and only serving the demand. How long a store would you need? And we think that answer is somewhere around the 600 or 700 megawatt-hour duration. And that's what you need to run a robust system. And even though that technology that's out there, that long duration, isn't running very often, it has a very low utilization. It's a bit like a peaking plant. It has a very high capacity and resilience value. That's the stuff that really saves you during your Ukraine crisis. It saves you when there's no wind on the system or no solar, the famous Dunkelflaute. Okay, so we think that chart tells you a lot about the mix of storage you're going to need on the system. You'll probably need a mix of something that can do the easy 8-hour stuff that can move a lot of energy around. You need something to keep the lights on in the Dunkelflaute, but won't handle much energy at all. And you probably need something in the middle, which is traditionally where the LDES would sit. I'm not making any hard definitions here of where do you swap from short duration to long duration, but broadly speaking, I mean, short duration is less than 10 hours. Long duration is up to 150, 200, and the sort of backup stuff, your peaking plant is in the hundreds of hours. We do have that resilience today. That comes from a stack of coal in Money Point. We rely at the moment, frankly, on the GB gas system. We've no other storage on the Irish system, and so we are leaning very heavily on the gas system. We have enough peakers. We have 7 gigawatts of peakers to meet the peak demand, well, a lot more, in fact. But they rely in turn on an infinite supply of fuel in the gas network, and we'll come back to that again. I suppose the other kind of really interesting finding when you look at this is that the good news is we're already building enough renewables to get to 100% RESI. So that volume of renewables that we're planning is not just enough for 80%. It's enough for 100%. If we just don't throw away 45% of it. Take that 45%, time shift it, and get it back and close that gap if you feel long enough duration storage. Technology options. ESB very kindly have summarized the technology space. It's very up-to-date. One came out, I think, 2 weeks ago, and they've done a really good summary of all the various technologies ranked by technology readiness level. I think it's a fairly comprehensive cover here, and you'll see all of those technologies that are listed there. They're all in the 10-hour plus range. Everything there is capable of storing duration for much longer than just your vanilla lithium-ion battery. Okay, so how do we choose what is the right mix of store, and essentially what is the right entire mix within an energy system? Because we're talking here about potentially a world where we are running with just renewables and storage and interconnection. So How do you work that out? I'd love to be able to put it all on a single chart, but there's just too many variables to do that. But just because there's a lot of variables doesn't mean you can't run an optimization system to find the cheapest way of running a power system, and there's lots of tech tools out there to do that. And it's a fairly simple optimization as they go. There's no fuel to worry about. There's no pricing to worry about. You're simply looking at what's the lowest annualized capex plus opex that serves the load. You do need to take into account the capex, opex, round trip efficiency, standing losses, import, export capacity, hours. These are the variables you put in the model, and they're all have a significant effect. But it's not that complicated an optimization in the end of the day. The kind of tensions and trade-offs that you're looking at are kind of interesting that come out of that once you start playing with a model like that. For example, the relative price of solar and wind. At the moment, if you start with a system that is wind and storage only, then you'll have a summer-winter bias. So it's good to throw some solar at it. And so if solar is cheap, you can balance that up. And if you get rid of the seasonal effect, that means you don't need seasonal storage. You only need, of months in duration, you only need days duration, and that's a big saving. If solar gets very cheap, you might build too much of it in the summertime that's operating in the summertime, and now you're having to build more storage just to move that surplus solar from summer to winter, and that might not pay anymore. So the real message here is, don't be blinded by cost fall. Cost of solar is falling faster than wind, but if we build too much of it, it won't have the same value. And this is the key here, is this modeling needs to tease out the value. And you can only determine the value of these different technologies when you put them into a model like this and say, well, how does the renewables and the storage and the interconnection play with each other? The other sort of things that happen, a high capacity factor of wind is much more valuable than low. So I mean, you have a choice of getting 4 gigawatts of wind at 30% capacity factor versus 3 gigawatts at 40%. It's the same energy, but it's far easier to store and far easier to bring 3 gigawatts of wind down the network, and so that's much more valuable. At the moment, we don't reward high capacity factor wind. We pay at a flat rate per megawatt hour, so that's a weakness. We need to keep an eye on the PSO pot again. Slightly unexpected outcomes. If you decrease the cost of wind, it pays to throw more of it away. You'll have more curtailment on the system. It'll never pay to build so much storage that there'll be zero just surplus wind. So straight away, that tension means that the cost of wind goes down, then the amount you throw away will go up. Simple as that. Energy efficiency, a lot of talk of energy efficiency again. Energy efficiency is no good if it's just happening generally at random times. It needs to happen at times when power is most valuable. There's no point having energy efficiency when it's windy. It only matters if you get it when it's when we're short of energy. Again, if you increase the round trip efficiency, if you increase the round trip efficiency of lithium-ion storage, then you don't have to build as much renewables because you don't lose as much. But round trip efficiency isn't so important for long duration storage because it's not handling as big a volume of energy. So what kind of system do you end up with? And this table here is one of our, what we think based on costs by 2030 might be a fairly optimized mix of system. And I wanted to just kind of tease out this idea again that if you don't just look at it on the basis of an energy split. By energy, the renewables and the interconnectors are handling a lot, and the LDES and green peakers are handling very little volume. But by capacity, all of your security of supply and all of your resilience is coming from the green peakers and the LDES. And in terms of cost, just like today's system, you do have to spend quite a lot of money on parts of the system that aren't generating much energy, because that's your stability, that's your reliability, that's what keeps the lights on. So, and in the same sense, LDES so directly may not be shouldering the biggest burden in terms of decarbonisation, and you might be able to make a case for LDES alone just on the decarbonisation play. There are probably other places in the energy system where you could save 4% energy that might be cheaper, but that's not the point. The point is we want to stop importing gas price crises from Ukraine, and so we just need to get off. It's those last few percent of the hours of the year that are the really important ones, and they're the ones that we need to get out of fossil fuels completely. When you look at that plant mix, you look at some of the things you could do. Why wouldn't you just do it all with RES and interconnectors? And people are seriously suggesting this with the supergrid. I don't think that's a runner at all. I mean, I think it would be crazy to give up our energy sovereignty and just say we'll hope that Europe will feed us power when we want it. Could you do it all with lithium ion? I mean, just to be clear, at lithium ion prices today, our model wouldn't build any lithium ion. It's simply not economic. But we do recognize that it's coming down in price. And if it comes down in price, then it would be worth buying a portion of lithium ion because it tends to have a better round trip efficiency. Let it do the sort of high rapid cycling, particularly of solar, and then keep the LDES, which tends to have a lower round trip efficiency for other stuff. Could you do it with all with LDES? Like I say, you could. You don't need lithium ion with it, but LDES typically can't go out past 100, 150 hours, and you do have to get to 600 or 700 hours. And so you're always going to have some element of peakers, green peakers, I think, on the system. Could we do it with renewables and peakers? Why not just do that? That's simple. We already have the peakers. Why not just use those? Well, if you try and put liquid fuel into peakers for 20% of our 40 terawatt hours demand in 2030, I was lazy here. I gave the job to ChatGPT, and it says we would need 5.3 million acres of biodiesel, which exceeds our arable land area of 3.6 acres. I think it's not a bad proxy for all the other things, liquid fuels you might put in, like HVO or sustainable aviation fuel or methanol. All of those are very expensive fuels, and a lot of them require a carbon source of some point. And so, biodiesel is not a bad proxy. It's just a really bad idea. You just couldn't do it, and you wouldn't want to do it. There's a good reason why peakers are kept to 1% today, and why they should be in the future as well. They're serving it. They're offering you capacity. Don't use them for energy. Big question, of course. People say, well, hold on, we have a gas network. Why not use that for the peakers? So gas network. Bear with me on this one. This is fairly kind of new information. I haven't really seen this being discussed much before. A big caveat as I start with this is a couple of hours work, a couple of hours research and Googling. The numbers may not be exactly right, but I think that the relative movement probably illustrates the trend we're looking at. So bottom line, I think we shouldn't plan on the gas network being available. Certainly not using fossil gas, and almost definitely not on biomethane or hydrogen as well. This is Mare's forecast for what the throughput in terawatt hours on the gas network would be, based on the fact that we're going to electrify residences. We're not going to use it in the power system, and industry has routes to electrification. So rapid fall off in the throughput. The significance of that is that today's gas network leaks, and you might say 0.5% leakage is not a big deal. But if you look at that as a fraction, this is Engineers Ireland, so I think we'll get the idea that the leakage rate is not dependent on how much gas is flowing through the system. It's dependent on just how much pressure is in the system. So basically, in the future, we'll have a very large, underutilized but highly pressured transmission and distribution gas system still leaking methane. You've got to multiply the global warming potential of that methane by 82, and suddenly you end up with some really big numbers, and you realize that in fact we're leaking, even if the gas on the network was green, its global warming impact could greatly exceed any savings it would have from being green. What I call the WACC death spiral is the cost of, at the moment, our regulators offer people who are lending money to build the gas grid, get very cheap money at 3.6%, because our regulators say, don't worry, we've got your backs. We're going to make sure we set tariffs to make sure you get your money back no matter what. But I think if you're owning an asset like the gas network, which may not exist in 5 years, 10 years time, I think it's crazy to be thinking that anyone is truly lending money at that rate. And if they are, well, if the regulators got their backs, well, it's the taxpayer. It's you and I are holding the can on this, So I think the WACC has got to increase as the risk goes up. And the cost death spiral, Ofgem knows this. This has been discussed widely. It's very simple. The more cost, same cost of the system, less customers, more cost on the remaining customers, and it spirals onwards. And just to put some numbers on it there on the right hand side, if the throughput in today is 60 terawatt hours, drops to 19 terawatt hours, carbon price goes up. The price of leakage, the EU methane strategy is now measuring leakage. It's clear that the direction travel there is to start pricing the leakage of methane from our system. If you just have 0.5% leak on the system, and another 1% from the anaerobic digestion plant, suddenly, the cost of buying carbon credits for those leakages goes high. Let's look at the RAB, the regulated asset base. Today's system doesn't have storage, so it's not resilient. So there's discussions about recommissioning Kinsale or building an FSRU floating storage regasification unit. These things come with $1 billion price tag, roughly, maybe more. And so I've added that in there. I've increased the WACC, as I said. I've decreased the asset life. And I've just totted up the numbers just the same way as the regulator tots up how to charge the annual fees. And you see there that the total annual cost of the gas network jumps from 400 million a year to maybe 4 times higher, 1,500 million a year. But if its usage drops at the same time, then the cost per megawatt hour, is 10 times higher. So that's the sort of figure that triggers a death spiral. And to step back from it, I mean, that's what it is. It's a big, leaky, underutilized pipe network that's expensive to own and operate, and I don't think we can or should be using it to support peakers, at least. So I think any plans for relying on the gas network need to be treated with caution and proceed very carefully. It's at least a 50-50 shot that it won't be there. Let's talk about data centers briefly. There's a lot of text on this slide. In interest of time, I won't go through all of it in too much detail. And I'll put the text here so you can digest this in your time. But look, bottom line, we need to be welcoming data centers. They've been very good to us over the years. They pay a huge amount of tax here. We've got the wind and sun. We need to find a way of getting the wind and the sun to the data centers, and shame on us if we can't work out a way of doing that. I don't think we should try and do that. But with biomethane, you can read through all the reasons there, in your own time frame. The bit I'd like to focus on there is the 24/7 corporate PPA. I think the right way to welcome a data center onto the Irish grid without breaking the existing grid and without driving up prices for call it the rest of us is to match the data center load with a 24/7 corporate PPA, which is a balanced portfolio of batteries, LDES, and green peakers. And the reason it's so effective is that if you have 100% matching in all hours, and it's slightly unique to Ireland. In Ireland, we're short of not just energy. 98% is good enough if you just want to say, hey, the data centers are green. They're not going to break our carbon budgets. 98% is fine. But the last 2% is the bit that worries Bryan and his team. The last 2% of the hours of the year are the time that you really need that extra resilience. And so if you've got that 100% matching, well, now you know that there was additional megawatts and megawatt hours built on the system to match that data center, and the data center can truly say, look, we built everything extra that is needed to support us. We are completely neutral on the system. So we think that might be what's coming in this glide path to a 24/7 corporate PPA in the CRU large energy use connection policy. Microsoft and Google have already committed to this. And look, we think that a data center who puts up their hand and says, yeah, we'll sign up to a 24/7 PPA, that demonstrates we are not having any negative impact on the grid. We think they should be given a clear route to planning permission and a grid connection. And we think that's a valid solution that to date, no one seems to be coming up with any sensible solutions on this. The other big area where LDES makes a difference more than might be immediately obvious is on avoiding the need to build new network. This is a little bit of simple modeling. This Donegal is one of the simpler areas to model because there's 3 circuits coming out of it. There's too much wind up there. There's a level of constraint up there at the moment. 6% by 2030. That probably will go up to 21% constraint level when there's about 890 megawatts of wind up there. But the grid isn't actually full at that point. It's only utilized to the tune of about 50 or 59% there. If you throw a short duration battery up there, you'll get some more wind up there and have the same level of constraint and slightly better network utilization. But if you throw a long duration energy storage up in Donegal at the same megawatt level, but 100-hour duration, well, now you can put a lot more wind up there and you're using the network a lot better. And that's just Donegal, but the same thing applies anywhere, whether that's a renewable cluster in the Midlands, whether it's a sunny southeast with solar. In fairness, solar is happier with a little shorter duration batteries. Or whether it's offshore connection points or indeed the way we flow power on our interconnections with our neighbors. In all cases, smoothing out the peaks and troughs of renewables is very, very valuable. And I suppose the case study in this one is locationality. So the downside is at the moment, there's no incentive to go to Donegal. If you build there, the battery operator doesn't see any of the benefits, so the value chain is sort of broken. And so there isn't really any clear locational signal that puts the batteries in. And we've already built, 700 megawatts of lithium-ion batteries were built in the last couple of years. They weren't built with any particular location signal. They were built where it was convenient to do so. And as a result, we seem to be building STATCOMs separately. And STATCOMs can do the same thing as batteries. It's a really, really horrible bit of policy and it's kind of an own goal here. We're spending, 100 million or more on STATCOMs when when if we had sent the locational signal to the batteries, we could have killed two birds with one stone, and we didn't. So that's what happens when we don't get a sufficiently sophisticated market that sends us to the right location. ESB networks' current storage protection is strongly locational. They know where they're short of problems on their distribution system, and they're doing the right thing. They're procuring the right volumes of storage in the right locations. It's harder at a national level. How do you choose at a national level the right volumes of the right technology with the right durations at the right locations? And ideally, this procurement that Bryan is working on and the options there will need to do that. It's a really challenging option. It's a really challenging problem to solve, because you're looking at trying to co-optimize the clusters, the grid, the renewables, and the storage all at once. But the prize is huge. I mean, there's a lot of investment, and when you build it in the wrong place, you're just wasting money. We ran a further study on this. I'm just conscious of time. I'll finish up pretty quickly now, just to say here, we same as what we did for Donegal, we ran for the whole of Ireland. So we have a fully optimized combined Plexus and PSSE type of kind of network and dispatch model, and we gave it the full system. And the good news is it's possible to run the entire system on today's network, or at least today's network plus what's planned for 2030, with serving all the hours with just renewables and storage. And the good news is that there's not much curtailment oversupply. You're under 8% total dispatch down, which is way less than the 35% figure you heard from Bryan there. So LDES does work, and the PSO will certainly thank you for it. So wrap it up. Key messages: we can get to 100% decarbonized power system with the same amount of renewables and grid that we're already planning, if we get the right optimum mix of storage and green peakers on the system. LDES is crucial. It's less about energy and more about resilience. Any energy system relying on the gas network is high risk. So don't put the taxpayer on the hook for what happens if it goes into the death spiral. And I suppose in the meantime, don't buy any gas infrastructure that needs bolting down. Leasing is better than buying. We've got to support the data centers, and LDES is definitely the key to doing that. We can get way more renewables on the system, on the network, without building more grid, if we add LDES at the right locations. And I suppose at the end of the day, today's markets aren't going to bring that forward. They're not going to bring forward an optimum blend of renewables, interconnection, storage in the right location. But there are people working on how to solve that problem. And if we can solve that problem, and I think there is no more important task for regulators and policymakers at the moment, well, then we will get the right investment of tens of billions at the right location. Okay, let's hear from the Q&A.
Thanks very much, Peter.